everybody, Mark aka the Nerdy Punk back again today for a new video. Hope you guys are doing well. Happy summer, everybody. It is June, what is it, June 3rd, I believe. We are just into the new month, and it's been a while since I made a video, but I wanted to kind of jump on here and get back into the video making process. The end of the school year just kind of kicked my ass this year, so I've kind of been recovering for the past week or so. So with that kind of out of the way, I'd like to get back into making some videos again. So I'm going to go ahead and today recap the last 2 months of things that I've watched and logged into Letterboxd. And of course I missed the April recap, so that's why we're going to put both April and May together. April was a pretty successful month for me in terms of watching movies. May was not. Like I said, May was a rough month. But I only watched 7 movies in May. I was able to watch in total between the 2 months, 23 movies. So we're going to go through these as quickly as possible so this video is not, too terribly long. So let's go ahead and get started with April. So the first movie that I watched in April was The Aviator, released in 2004, directed by Martin Scorsese. Now, my April, I decided to do a theme for my movie watching, and I was going to watch as many Leonardo DiCaprio performances as possible. Leo is one of my favorite actors, probably my single favorite male actor working today, and I think he's kind of one of those last great movie stars that we really have. Sure, there's a lot of movie stars, but Leo is like one of those iconic, like Robert De Niro level people, where every movie he's in, I'm going to want to watch. So I wanted to do a little deep dive on his performances, and The Aviator was one that I hadn't seen. This movie, it follows Howard Hughes, who is a real person, and so I guess it's kind of a biopic, and it kind of follows his life and kind of his deteriorating mental health, and I thought it was a very interesting performance from Leo. That's kind of the lens that I viewed most of these movies through, was Leo, but I think overall it was a pretty solid movie. I wouldn't put it in Scorsese's best, but it's definitely a good one to check out at least once. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. Next up, I rewatched Django Unchained, my second Leo movie, and this is one of my favorite Leo performances. He gives a phenomenal performance as the villain in this story, and it's a fun movie, of course. I think I liked it a little bit less than I originally did on this rewatch, but I still really enjoyed the film, and I think it's a funny, it's at times serious, it's of course gore fest out the wazoo with Tarantino, so I still really like Django. It's not my favorite Tarantino, but it's definitely a solid one. Gave it a 4 out of 5. Third movie that I watched is Monkey Man, of course released in 2024, directed by Dev Patel. I have a full-length movie review for this one if you want to see my in-depth thoughts. Just hit that one up on the channel. I really liked this movie. I thought it was fantastic. It was an incredibly impressive directorial debut by Dev Patel, and I was a really big fan of it, so I gave that one a 4 out of 5. Next one, Leo month number 3. I rewatched Titanic for the first time in probably like 10, 15 years at least. I want to say I was a kid when I last watched this movie. Because of that, I didn't remember much about it, so it was kind of like watching it for the first time. It's, of course, an iconic film released in 1997, directed by James Cameron. I believe, adjusted for inflation, like the second highest grossing movie of all time, something like that, is right up there. Of course, everybody and their mother has seen this movie, but I was really impressed with it. And I don't need to really say that because I know everybody really likes this movie. But I was kind of blown away with how much I liked it. I kind of expected it to be, a little forgettable, but I was really blown away with this, and I loved this movie. I think there's some flaws to it, but those flaws are very small. I gave this one a 4.5 out of 5. Chemistry between Leo and Kate Winslet is just off the charts. And I think Kate Winslet, I didn't really realize how much I like her as an actress. With this one, and then Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which I watched for the first time not that long ago. So I'm really impressed with her as well, but another great Leo performance. Fifth movie that I watched in April was Slumdog Millionaire from 2008, directed by Danny Boyle. And this was a Best Picture winner, so crossing another Best Picture winner off the list. Another movie starring Dev Patel, and this was kind of when Dev Patel became a household name. So I wanted to watch this one because I hadn't seen it. It was Best Picture winner, and I was riding high off of Monkey Man with Dev Patel. And I was really impressed with this one too. Definitely felt dated, but it had a lot of great messaging to it, and it was a very creative way of telling the story. Like I said, some of the editing felt very dated. It was very late 2000s. It took me back to my middle school days, but I really enjoyed the film overall. Gave it a 4 out of 5. Next one that I watched is LBJ from 2016, directed by Rob Reiner. Now, this is a biopic of Lyndon Johnson, who is, I think, one of the more underrated presidents. He's definitely, I think, the definition of a mixed bag in terms of his handling of Vietnam, but also what he did at home, which was, civil rights acts, war on poverty, creation of Medicare. I think these are all fantastic things without this delving too much into a history lecture here. But at the same time, you've got Vietnam and all of that mess. And this movie really doesn't talk about Vietnam at all. There were 2 Lyndon Johnson movies, this one, and then I think the other one was called All the Way. It had Bryan Cranston starring as Lyndon Johnson. And I get those 2 confused so often because they were released very close to each other. I much prefer the Bryan Cranston version. I think Woody Harrelson did a pretty good job as Lyndon Johnson, but I really wasn't a fan of the film. Lots of pacing issues, just overall very forgettable. So I gave this one a 2.5 out of 5. Next up, getting back into Leo month here, The Revenant from 2015, directed by Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu. My bad. This was the movie, of course, that Leo finally won his Best Actor Oscar for, and I think it's very well deserved. This film to me is much more impressive than it is that I love the film. I can't really say I loved the film, and I can't wait to rewatch it, because I really don't plan on rewatching this for a while, but it was definitely intense. It delivered in terms of the performance. It was impressive. It was an impressive film visually. Story-wise, I just didn't care about it that much. It was hard to get me wrapped up into it, and it was very much an intense film. I've said that word like 4 times, but that being said, I enjoyed the film. Can't say that I loved it, but I was very impressed with it, and it's 3.5 out of 5. Next one here, new release is Civil War, of course, released in 2024, directed by Alex Garland. So I'm a big Alex Garland fan. Ex Machina is one of my favorite movies of all time, and I've really enjoyed his writing and his directing over the years. But this one, very mixed for me. If you want my in-depth thoughts on it, definitely go find the video on the channel. I did a movie review for this one. It's very mixed. I appreciate what Alex Garland was trying to do. I just don't feel like it was executed all that well. So I gave this one a 3 out of 5. Next up, back to Leo, Inception from 2010, directed by Christopher Nolan. And when I was younger, this was one of my favorite movies of all time. It's definitely slid down the list a lot over the years, just because I think there's other movies that are better than this. But I still think this is, although probably overhyped, is still a very good achievement in filmmaking. It was a very creative story at the time. When I first watched this, I had never seen a movie like this before, so I thought it was really cool, and it still is really cool. It's just, I feel like we've it's almost like beating a dead horse, when we keep talking about Inception over and over again. It's kind of loses its luster a little bit and loses its specialness, but I still think it's a solid performance from DiCaprio. I wouldn't put it at his best, but it's a really solid film. And when I look back and I rewatch it these days, that's basically my takeaway. Is it the greatest thing ever made? Probably not, but it is still a fantastic film. I gave it a 4 out of 5. Next up, the only rewatch within the month, and that was Civil War, yet again, from 2024. So I probably wouldn't have gone to see this in the theater twice, but I had a friend who really wanted to see it, and I decided to go with her and watch it, and I still basically had the same opinion, 3 out of 5. Next up, 420, of course, happens in April, and for those of you who partake, I felt it was appropriate to watch a stoner comedy, so I checked out Friday for the first time. This is from 1995, directed by F. Gary Gray, and this, of course, stars Chris Tucker and Ice Cube. Classic stoner comedy. If you've never seen it, you definitely need to watch it. I think it's hilarious. It does the job that it's designed to do. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. Next up, once again, Leo. A couple more Leo movies here. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood from 2019. One of my favorite Leo performances. This is just one of my favorite movies of all time. I love it. It's near the top of my list for Tarantino movies. And it's the perfect vibe to me. It's, really immerses you in 1969 Hollywood. Great music, great cinematography, great performances. I really love this movie. Gave it a 5 out of 5. Next one, The Departed from 2006, directed by Martin Scorsese. So I'd already seen The Departed. I watched it, I think, last year for the first time. Really liked it. And I gotta say, I liked it even more this time. The only thing is, in terms of, like I said, the lens I'm watching these movies through is Leo, right? I'm kind of focused in on his performance. To me, Leo is very much overshadowed in this movie by Jack Nicholson. Jack Nicholson delivers one of the best performances in a career that is highlighted with fantastic performances. He is just incredible in this movie. And I think everyone else kind of fades into the background a little bit. But I think it's a really good story. It's very unique for Scorsese. I don't think he does a whole lot of remakes. I don't know that you necessarily call this a remake, but it definitely is inspired by a foreign film that was released before it, Infernal Affairs. So it's kind of interesting to see Scorsese give his take on a story that's already been told before. But I've never seen Infernal Affairs. I probably need to get into that and watch that. But I think in terms of the time, very creative. I really like this movie. I don't really need to say that because a lot of people love this movie. But definitely a deserving Best Picture win for sure. Next up, another new release, Challengers, released in 2024, directed by Luca Guadagnino. This is the tennis movie, of course, that stars Zendaya, as well as Mike Feist and Josh O'Connor. And this movie was one of my most anticipated movies of the year. I love Luca Guadagnino's work. Call Me By Your Name is one of my favorite movies of the past 10 years. But this one, I really wasn't loving. For me, the problem with Challengers is the buy-in. It was very hard to get me to care about these characters. They all make really terrible decisions. They're all pretty terrible people. And so it's really hard for me to buy into the story. I thought it was executed pretty well. But then there was also a few pacing issues I had with the film. I felt like it drug on a little bit. But, I think this one's definitely a mixed bag. I gave it a 3 out of 5. Next up, so late in April, there was a Studio Ghibli Fest, which was basically screenings of Studio Ghibli movies in the movie theater, and it kicked off with Spirited Away. Now, I had never seen a Studio Ghibli movie, so this is my first one in the theater. Really cool experience, and I was blown away with this film. I love Spirited Away. It was a fantastic animated film. Lots of great story elements. It had basically everything. It had, heart to it. It had comedy. It had drama. I just really loved this film, and I could see it becoming one of my favorites of all time. I didn't want to completely jump to the 5 out of 5 rating, so I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. And then I wrapped up April, wrapping up Leo month with The Wolf of Wall Street from 2013, of course, directed by Martin Scorsese. This is my favorite Scorsese movie. And going into the month, I felt that this was Leo's best performance. So I thought, probably the proper way to do this was to watch a bunch of Leo performances and then watch this one at the end to see if it was still my favorite. And I'm not going to reveal if it's still my favorite or not, because I'm planning on doing a video where I rank some of Leo's performances. So stay tuned for that on the channel. Hopefully soon I'll get that video out. But I still obviously really love this movie. There's nothing really wrong with it in my opinion. It's an adrenaline rush. 5 out of 5. Now we get into May. So like I said, May was a little bit tougher of a month for me. So I only watched 7 movies. We kick it off with Selma from 2014, directed by Ava DuVernay. I showed this movie to my history students, my American history class, and I've seen this movie many times before. I think it's one of the best movies that depicts the civil rights movement. I think it does so in a really great way. Ava DuVernay basically follows the Selma voting rights movement led by Dr. King. So, by the way, David Oyelowo, I hope I'm saying that right, best portrayal of Dr. King I've ever seen in film, in my opinion. I think he was fantastic in this movie. But it does a really good job of kind of showing you what happened in Selma, Alabama, and how the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was passed, because it's one of those moments like in history, if it doesn't happen then, it's going to be, tough to get it to happen in the future. So it's a very urgent moment in history, and I think it's depicted very well. Next up, The Royal Tenenbaums from 2001, directed by Wes Anderson. So this was one of the Wes Anderson movies I hadn't seen before. It's a classic of his. Many people consider it to be his best, and I see why. It is a phenomenal film. It's very early Wes Anderson, so it's got some of those elements that you're going to see later in his career that are not fully fleshed out yet, but it's got a lot of heart at this story, which is sometimes my problem with Wes Anderson. I feel like there's not enough heart at the center of some of his stories, but this one was right up there. It was very emotional at times, which I do not expect from Wes Anderson. But there were moments that had me, on the verge of tears. It was a very good movie, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 4 out of 5. Next up, the only trip to the movie theater of May, and that was to see The Fall Guy. Of course, released in 2024, directed by David Leitch. Went with a friend to see this one, and I had wanted to see it, but there really wasn't anything else out, so we just kind of decided to go to this one instead, because it was just kind of the only one we were even remotely interested in. And it, of course, stars Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt, and it's very much an action comedy. It's a popcorn movie. It's a movie you can just kind of turn your brain off and watch. And as that, I thought it was executed pretty well. So I gave it a 3 out of 5. Nothing super special, but a good kind of turn your brain off movie. Next one, Gimme Shelter, released in 1970, directed by Albert and David Maysles and Charlotte Zwerin. I hope I said those names correctly. This is a documentary about the Rolling Stones and the Altamont Free Show, which was a pretty infamous event in 1969, where during a Rolling Stones concert, the Hells Angels, who had been hired as security, murdered a man in the crowd. And it was a very traumatic event nationally, and I think it is captured phenomenally well in this documentary. It does a great job of using amazing music from the Rolling Stones. There's some incredible moments in this documentary, both visually and musically, and I think it does a really good job of kind of blending the story of the Stones with this traumatic event, and I think it does it incredibly well. To me, this is the gold standard of music docs. It's a 5 out of 5. Next one. So I did a double feature with my friends back in May where we watched a couple Jack Black movies. So we watched Nacho Libre, which I had never seen before, from 2006, directed by Jared Hess. So for people my age, like late 20s, Jack Black and Nacho Libre were probably part of your childhood. It was not part of my childhood. I knew of it. Of course, I knew it existed. Never watched it growing up. I wasn't really excited about watching this movie, I gotta be honest, but I was really impressed with it over time. Now, that may have been the edibles talking, but I had so much fun with this movie. It was funny. There were some very cringy moments for sure, but it did have a lot of heart at the core of the story as well. So I really liked this movie. And if you happen to get a chance to check it out on a Friday night or something, definitely give it a watch. After that, we watched The Polka King from 2017, directed by Maya Forbes, also, of course, starring Jack Black. This one I did not find that funny or enjoyable. There were a couple jokes that I really liked, but for the most part, this was just kind of cringeworthy and not all that entertaining. I gave this one a 1.5 out of 5. And finally, to wrap up my 2 months here, end of May, I watched Up in Smoke, of course, from Cheech and Chong from 1978, directed by Lou Adler. A classic stoner comedy. I mean, if you have seen any movies in the genre, it's probably that one. I was on a big kind of Cheech and Chong kick for a little while, watching a lot of their, interviews, podcasts, that kind of thing. And I had never seen this movie, so I decided, gotta watch it. And it's hilarious. It's such a fun time. And, if you want to partake a little bit and you want a movie to watch while you're doing so, you can't really go wrong with this. Yeah, I gave it a 4 out of 5. Really solid film. All right, that's going to wrap up my thoughts here for the April-May recap for Letterboxd of 2024. So my goal of doing every month is still valid. I went ahead and got April in there. Like I said, I want to get back into videos. I want to get back into making some content again. And I've kind of got the energy to do it now. So I'm excited for some movie theater trips this summer. I'm hoping to see something this week at some point. Don't know that I'll do a YouTube video for it, but I have a lot of videos kind of planned. So definitely stay tuned. Hit the subscribe button if you're interested in more content. And I will see you guys later. Have an awesome day. Bye.